What makes a great history teacher?
The first thing that students say makes a great history teacher is a history teacher that invests in good relationships with them.
You need to be enthusiastic about the past, mainly because the majority of the people we're talking about are dead.
Passion.
Passion.
It's got to be passion.
Which teachers do you remember the most and do you respect the most? It wasn't necessarily that they had the best technical skills or got the most grades in it. That teacher loved that subject so much and they made us love it as well.
The creativity.
Become critical thinkers.
The ability to get sidetracked. And being prepared to go with being sidetracked.
Hi, and welcome to Hey History Teacher, a series of evidence-backed tips and advice to help you teach history at primary or high school. You'll hear from expert history teachers and university educators across Australia. We're asking a big question in this episode. What's great history teaching? You'll hear a mix of answers, but they can be boiled down to two things. One, how you approach history teaching, and two, the essential skills that great history teaching passes on to students. I'm your host, Anna Clark, a professor of history and someone who's passionate about history and history education. We've teamed up with the History Teachers Association of New South Wales to make this professional learning resource for you. There are 8 episodes, about 20 to 30 minutes each. And that's not all. On the Hey History website, download tip sheets for each topic and get links to resources mentioned. heyhistory.net. Let's go. So what makes a great history teacher? It's a big question. Our first answer is from someone who researches history education, sees and talks with heaps of teachers, and is a former history teacher herself. Meet Claire Colledge.
I'm Dr. Claire Colledge. I'm a lecturer in education at the University of Sydney. I'm also a former history teacher. I taught in schools for 15 years and now I research history and humanities teaching. Students really respond well to teachers that believe in them, have high expectations of them, but also really take the time to get to know them. And I want to acknowledge here that that's not a straightforward and easy thing. That's a lot of emotional labour for teachers when they have 30 plus students in the classroom. It's glib to say get to know all your students, but I want to acknowledge that that's really challenging and complicated work, but students really value it. The second thing that students really value in their teachers is teachers who know and love history. It should be really affirming to all us history nerd teachers that students see and value the passion that we bring for our subject matter in our teaching, and when we let that passion show through the different things that we organise for students, through even sharing what we're reading or what we've learnt about, students love to see that knowledge and that passion.
Being enthusiastic and letting your passion show was something all the teachers shared with us. It didn't matter which subject. And as teacher and educator Ben Lawless says, this is backed up by evidence.
Hi, my name is Ben Lawless. I'm a history teacher in Melbourne, Australia. I also do a little bit of teaching at University of Melbourne. I've been teaching history for about 13 years. If you read a lot of the literature about the experience that students have, good teachers versus okay teachers, they say their best teachers are really, really passionate about their subject.
A passionate teacher can have a contagious effect on their students, according to a 2016 study. It found teacher interest and passion contribute significantly to positive learning experiences for young people.
There was another really interesting thing I read quite recently that talked about the level of passion. So when teachers are asked to rank their own level of passion on like a scale of 0 to 10, they go, oh yeah, I'm level 8, I'm so passionate. And then they ask their students and they're like, yeah, that teacher was like a 4. Because young people are so much more enthusiastic and passionate and, externalizing stuff anyway. So I would say if you want to be a better history teacher, we're lucky that most history teachers are massively passionate about their subject, and that's not true for all subjects. So we're lucky there, and we're lucky that we've got the power of story, which is massively helpful for memory, and that's how humans have learnt for 200,000 years is through story. But also be over-the-top passionate about your subject. Because we're like, hey, I'm a 50-year-old man. Look how passionate I'm being right now. It's like, yeah, are you though? That's not that passionate. I can be more passionate.
I'm running with Ben here. We should all try to be over-the-top passionate about history. But hey, that doesn't mean you have to go all out. Some of us are passionate in different ways. Speaking for myself, I'm a bit of an introvert. I don't like to be on stage, but I'm a passionate historian, and I hope my enthusiasm for that subject is infectious to students. Have a think about what makes you passionate and what sort of passion you can bring to your classroom that's still authentically yourself. So what do you do to tackle those topics that are less exciting?
I am Cary and I am a history teacher from Casula High School in Sydney Southwest. I've been teaching here for 13 years. This is my second home. I used to come here as a student myself, so I don't really know too much different. There are some topics, some aspects of topics that might be drier, something that you might not be overly enthused about. But in those sort of situations, that's where you can go, okay, well, I'm not really enjoying this. Get the creativity out and start asking those questions. Well, how can I make these drier aspects more meaningful or more engaging?
Creativity. After knowing your students and showing your passion in class, creativity is the next thing teachers talked about when it comes to great history teaching. It helps make you a better teacher. And, like Chad said, it helps you get through the stuff you're not so into. University educator Colledge says that creativity is something that students really value.
The third thing that students really value is the creativity and the pedagogical repertoire that history teachers bring to the classroom. So if you're a student that's seeing 4, 5 or 6 teachers a day and you have a teacher who is thinking a little bit creatively about how to engage students, has really put students at the centre of their planning and their thinking about what's going to happen in the classroom that day, students really want to work hard for those teachers and really respond well. And again, that's really difficult work. It's emotionally taxing and intellectually taxing for teachers to have that creativity on tap. But I think it's worth mentioning because I know that one of the conversations going on in education at the moment is about standardising pedagogy to a certain degree. The idea that students in different classrooms should be receiving similar experiences or teachers should be offering similar lessons to one another. And I suppose it's worth acknowledging that that's not what our students want. Our students have said that diversity and creativity and experience, having different learning experiences in different classrooms is really valuable. And so in the history classroom, it means that teachers should be taking their individual creativity and their passion and I suppose the particular way in which their historical passion is best expressed. They should be taking that out for a spin because students really value that. And these ideas that we should be teaching from a script or something like that is probably not going to fly with our students. We might experience some problems with student engagement if we start heading down that path.
That's not to say that content isn't important. There are key areas and topics that all students should know about. That's why we have a syllabus. It's just that you can lean into your own unique personality, passion and expertise to get creative. And, well, creativity came up so much we made a whole episode about it. You'll hear about the evidence around creativity and heaps of practical and transferable examples to get creative in class, from simple to more complicated. Follow Hey History in your podcast app and you'll see the episode on teaching history creatively. So, what else makes for great history teaching? When I learned history at school, some of my favourite memories are when the teacher got sidetracked and went with it. I had a history teacher who talked about nearly being conscripted for the Vietnam War when we were learning about it in class. I mean, we were in year 12. Some of the guys in my class were nearly 18, and it could have been them. Queensland teacher Sarah Coleman asked her high school history class what great history teaching was. And guess what? Getting sidetracked was one of their answers.
My name is Sarah Coleman. I am the Head of Humanities and Social Sciences at MacKillop Catholic College in Mount Peter, which is in far north Queensland. And I'm also on the Management Committee for the Queensland History Teachers Association, and I have co-authored a number of textbooks. What makes a great history teacher? I actually asked my ancient history class this in period 6. So it's because I thought, well, they're the ones that are in the room. Unanimously was passion. And then my modern history kids who also do ancient piped up and went, the ability to get sidetracked and being prepared to go with the being sidetracked. And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing Australian civil rights with my grade 10s right now, and we're making a decision as to what the 5 most defining moments are in the civil rights movement. And One of my girls, who is a First Nations student, said to me in class today, "Why did they hate black people so much?" My immediate response was because historically, people of colour have been deemed as being less than white people in the West. We spoke about, specifically in the Western tradition, that race is something that has been used as a way of defining hierarchy, and that ultimately everything is about power, right? And this was a way of being able to ensure power. So we then ended up in this whole side conversation around concepts of racial hygiene and perspectives on colour and why that exists. It was a 20 solid minute sidetrack, but that was a question that I reckon there would have been at least 10 other kids in the class that had. And it's a question that I think is worth stopping everything that you're doing and going, all right, let's unpack why this was a problem. Let's unpack why we even got to a point in Australian history where rights and freedoms for one group actually needed to be addressed because they had none. So it's giving the time and having the courage, I think, as a teacher. And I think for young teachers, it can be a challenge because you just want to ride and dive by your lesson plan. But it's the preparedness to just let the lesson plan go and go with where the kids want to go with that, because if that interest is there and the questions are there, they're questions worth answering. So I think, sometimes just chuck the lesson plan out.
Chucking the lesson plan out and going down tangents and sidetracks takes courage, as Sarah Coleman says.
The courage piece, I think, is real, and it can even be, courage can look different. The courage might be, that's a really good question. Can you just give me a minute to think about that? And just go, I'm going to come back to that. Keep doing what they're doing, come back, all right, I'm good to answer you now.
And another part of great history teaching is being okay with not knowing everything or not having the answer right now and saying that to your students. Sarah explains more.
If you're worried that the way that it's going to come out is not going to be right, like I'm generally pretty confident that what I say is going to come out the way that I mean it. But if you're a young teacher or you're new to teaching history, it may not be your background, it might not be your preferred area. You might be a PE teacher in country New South Wales who's been shoved into Year 9 history. You know, you might just need to go, that's a really good question, or I need some more information. Like, that takes as much courage. And I think students really do appreciate, number one, that you're thinking through what they've asked. If you don't feel like you can answer it straight away, you just take that moment and go, great question. Just acknowledge that it's an awesome question and we're going to come back to this, but I just need to do some more background reading.
We're halfway through the episode. Take a break if you need to. Hey, we're back. So to recap on great history teaching tips.
Get to know all your students.
Be over the top passionate.
Get the creativity out.
The ability to get sidetracked. You might just need to go, I need some more information.
Next up, we ask teachers, in great history teaching, what skills are passed on to students? We all know that history teaching is more than just the facts. Being a great history teacher is about teaching historical skills such as researching, evaluating evidence, asking critical inquiry questions of historical sources like who, what, why, and how. Learning to communicate our historical arguments and educated opinions is also a really important historical skill. Here's what our teachers had to say about these skills and great history teaching.
My name is Natalie Fong. I am the Head of Humanities at City Point Christian College. I am a history and an English teacher.
The first skill Natalie Fong talks about is how to research in the age of AI.
From having done a PhD, in fact, having done numerous university degrees myself, I've spent a lot of time researching and have good tips and advice for students about how to do research. Have been trying to record those as little videos so that they can refer to, how to use Trove, for example. I made a little video about that so they can use that as a resource. Also teaching them nowadays how to research ethically, not just through referencing, but how do we check, even if we use AI to help us find sources, and there's nothing wrong with that, how do we check the authenticity of those sources?
Natalie Fong also talks about those curriculum skills of questioning and communicating.
A lot of what historians do now is communicating findings, because you're often presenting a paper at a conference, or nowadays you do a lot of online webinars. So your work could be going out to anybody because anyone could join the webinar. Your challenge is communicating your research findings to a broad audience, not just academics, or academics would be part of the audience, but the general public. How do you communicate a complex argument, drawing on all your research in a way that anyone could understand? How do you use visuals to communicate your argument, things that you don't have to say necessarily? We also teach the students about the importance of questioning. So not only how to ask good questions, but how to answer questions. Because that's also what you do when you present a paper at a conference or a webinar. There's always Q&A time. People ask you questions about your research, your methodology, your argument, your opinion. You have to be able to answer those questions, even if your answer is something like, that's outside the scope of my research.
One of my favourite answers. Next up is thinking skills. What about critical thinking skills for primary school students or lower high school? Are they up to it? Here's David Boon, who's had a 36-year career in history education. He's taught from all of primary to year 10 and has held a number of curriculum and professional learning roles too. David used some thinking skills exercises from Harvard University in the United States. It's called Project Zero by the Graduate School of Education.
Project Zero is a Harvard project that's about teaching for understanding. And so I use visible thinking strategies, and I'll talk more about those in a later section.
Like its name, visible thinking strategies help make thinking visible. They're basically sets of questions called thinking routines that loosely guide the thought processes of students, step by step.
So see, think, wonder is one.
David Boon uses the thinking routine see, think, wonder as a way for students to think critically about sources in class.
It's having a structure around looking at a primary source where you're asking them to what do you actually notice in this primary source? What can you see? What do you think about it? What do you wonder? So that's an example of one. See, think, wonder. What do you see in it? This was grade 3-4s. We were looking at the local post office directory, which is like the thing that came before phone books. You had a post office directory which listed everyone in the town. It was only a small town. It was probably only back and front of one A4 sheet. Okay, I can see the surnames, I can see occupations. What do you think from that? Oh, okay, I think that they used to go to the hotel a lot because there are lots more hotels there then than there are now. And then what are your questions? What do I wonder? So giving them a structure to look at it as well is really important, not just saying here's a primary source and having the teacher have questions about it. Letting them come up with their observations to start with. And that's where I like to always go with my teaching, was getting what are the kids noticing, and okay, let's pursue those bits of it.
David reminds us that critical analysis of historical sources isn't intuitive. It's a skill we have to teach students, along with historical content like names and dates. David tells a story of how, as well as providing some structure to developing critical thinking skills, suddenly the lesson went down a sidetrack and got into difficult history too. So he went with both.
A student came forward and said, oh, well, where are the Chinese people? And so I said, oh, what makes you say that? What do you know about Chinese people being here? And he said, oh, because they weren't allowed they didn't come into the town much. They were sort of made to stay outside the town, and they had camps and things, and the locals didn't like them. And I said, well, how do you know that? And he said, well, because Dad and I go hunting and we go fishing and we go to where their camps were and we find their stuff. And the fact there was only one Chinese person named in the whole post office directory, and that was because he had a greengrocer shop in the town. There were like hundreds of Chinese in the local area, but not mentioned by name. But the student actually knew about it. So if you're using a primary source and asking students to think about what they can find from it, then they will find things you haven't even planned for them to find. As a teacher, you've got to be prepared for that sort of stuff.
David Boon gives another example of a Project Zero thinking routine, this time to help students think about an image.
So I'd been using maps and aerial photographs and things, but I didn't have a structure around it. I was just using them, and I can't even remember now how I used them exactly. But Project Zero gave me that structure to say, look, what do you so see, think, wonder is one. Another one is what makes you say that? So that's about evidence. So it's simply the question. There was one I had with a student I was working in their class, wasn't my class, and it was a student normally disengaged. He said, I think this was a prison. And I said, what makes you say that? And he said, well, I can see bars on the window. And no one else had noticed. There was so much happening in this image, and the building was way off in the background. And he hadn't noticed anything in the foreground. He'd noticed what was in the background, and he thought there were bars on the windows. And so, again, what makes you say that? It was the way that you actually have to have evidence for what you're saying.
Next, Western Sydney teacher Chad Cary talks about great history teaching, inspiring the students to regulate themselves. We usually think about self-regulation as about emotions, but it's more than just managing emotions. In an educational context, it's the broader skill of regulating your thoughts, behaviours and impulses to align with educational goals, and emotional management is a key part of that.
I have different approaches depending on whether it's my junior classes or whether it's my senior classes. I guess I'll talk about my approach with senior classes more. There has been a little bit of reluctance to overly engage with creativity because sometimes it can feel like a lot of time has gone past and you haven't ticked off certain areas of the syllabus. So that's a daunting process that we're always thinking about. What I've settled on is trying to inspire student self-regulation. So student self-regulation has the highest impact on student learning outcomes.
Self-regulation is a student's ability to plan, monitor and evaluate their own learning. Instead of relying on the teacher to drive every step, students learn to ask, what am I trying to find out? How am I going? And what do I do next? Teaching self-regulated learning strategies gives students an understanding of how learning happens, and it's a skill you can apply throughout your life.
And so my theory is that once students are engaged and inspired by the work, they're more likely to engage in vast amounts of reading, which of course is required. If we sit in class and do all of that reading, I start to get afraid that I'm going to have people falling asleep. I need to give students access to the curriculum, but also I need to explain to the students my thought process, explain to them the concept of student self-regulation, show them what that means, and I need to try and get them to understand that they need to put work in on their part.
Our very last tip for great history teaching is from Western Australian principal and history teacher Cathy Barron and Tasmania teacher David Boon. It's about being mindful of where your students are at developmentally, or, as David Boon puts it, how they see the world, and harnessing that.
Children are much more visually aware than adults. I went on an excursion once and the teacher was saying, oh, look at that building over there. And what I noticed was that half the children weren't looking at that building over there. Half of them were looking behind them at something far more interesting. And so I had all this video footage I captured of children doing what they weren't asked to do by the teacher. So looking at, seeing the world through the eyes of children is really important. What do they notice? Not what do I want you to notice? And harnessing it.
Here's Cathy Barron.
I've been a history teacher for about 34 years, thus the wrinkles and the grey hair, but the big smile on the face. I'm involved with the History Teachers Association of Australia. I'm currently the national president. I currently work as a principal of my school, and over my 34 odd years, I've worked across Western Australia in the Goldfields, in the Kimberleys, in metro area. and the wheat belt. Teenagers by nature is that developmentally the focus is on them. If they're in that early adolescence phase, it's about them. So how does it link to their world? So linking things to their family, linking things to their area in which they live. Why is that street named what it is? Why isn't it named something else? So having those kind of things happening where it makes it engaging because it's part of their real world. I used to use the example of social media, which will become an irrelevant example hopefully in a few years' time if you have lower school because they won't be able to access it. But if we're talking about online content, if you say to kids, this person has made a post, so do we believe 100% what this person says? And they'll go, no, and you'll go, why? And then you can talk about reliability and bring in those skills. What is the message that they're trying to get across? What's the purpose? Why has this person created this? And breaking it down into things that they know, but linking it to their skills, to things that are relatable to them, and knowing your class and knowing your kids. So if you're teaching kids and at home they don't get the newspaper, it's no use bringing the newspaper in as a big teaching tool. But if they are watching Sunrise as their be-all and end-all of what's happening in the world, you could use a snippet of that.
So to recap on great history teaching tips shared by teachers in the last half of this episode, teachers talked about skills.
How to research, how to ask good questions, how to answer questions.
Visible thinking strategies. What can you see? What do you think about it? What do you wonder?
Trying to inspire student self-regulation.
Seeing the world through the eyes of children is really important.
Hey History!
I'm Anna Clark, and you've been listening to Hey History Teacher. There are 7 other episodes in this series for you, from difficult histories to creative history teaching, advice for teachers new to history, or teaching outside their area of expertise, weaving country through school and syllabus, teaching history in all its complexity, and teaching the Australian Wars. A huge thanks to all the teachers we spoke to for this series. In this episode, you heard
Dr. Claire Colledge,
Sarah Coleman,
Ben Lawless,
Chad Cary,
Kathy Barron,
Paul Foley.
and David Boon.
I also have the same name as a very famous Australian cricketer.
Get a tip sheet summary of this episode on our website, heyhistory.net, and follow Hey History in your podcast app. This episode and the whole professional development series is funded by the History Teachers Association of New South Wales. Special thanks to Jonathan Dallimore. Hey History Teacher is produced by Jane Curtis at UTS Impact Studios. The executive producer of this series is Anna Clark. This podcast was made on Gadigal country in Sydney, Australia. Thanks for listening.